Hello, and welcome to Samuel's Fortress. I'm your host, Kirill, and today we will be discussing the demographics of ancient Macedonia. So, we're going to start today's video around the year 400 BC. I'm picking the year 400 BC somewhat arbitrarily, but this is the time period just prior to the expansion of ancient Macedon under the rule of Philip II and Alexander the Great. So I think it's a good period of time to show you what the demographics of Macedonia and the Balkans as a whole looks like prior to this expansion of the ancient Macedon. So if we look at the three regions of the territory of Macedonia, like we described in the previous video, you have Aegean Macedonia, Vardar Macedonia, and Pirin Macedonia. At this time, there are three major civilizations on the Balkans, and all three of them are represented within the territory of Macedonia. So you have the Hellenic civilization, the Illyrian civilization, and the Thracian civilization. Now, when I use the term civilization, I don't mean to imply that these are a unified peoples. A lot of times these civilizations have competing tribes, states, city-states within them. What I mean by, so they're not unified in any meaningful way. What I mean by civilization is that these are people who share roughly the same language, customs, culture, religion, mythos. These are a generally closely tied group of tribes that form a civilizational zone. So if you look at the three civilizational zones, like I said, in the region, the Hellenic, Illyrian, and Thracian civilizations, we'll go through them one by one and kind of describe how they're different and what areas of Macedonia they occupy. So if we look at Aegean Macedonia, modern-day Greek Macedonia, this is occupied by the Hellenic civilization, specifically the ancient kingdom of Macedon, which we will get to in a little bit. So Aegean Macedonia, modern-day Greek Macedonia, was at the time part of the Hellenic realm. If we look at Eastern Vardar Macedonia and Pirin Macedonia, basically the eastern half of the modern Republic of North Macedonia and of Bulgarian Macedonia, this is occupied by the Thracian civilization. The Thracians also occupy the modern-day territory of the Republic of Bulgaria. So Eastern Macedonia, all the way to the Black Sea pretty much, are the Thracians. Western Vardar Macedonia and Albania, Montenegro, Bosnia up into Croatia, this Adriatic coast going again into the western part of Vardar Macedonia, are the Illyrians. And I guess a little bit about the Thracians and the Illyrians, we don't know a whole lot about them. They weren't as sophisticated as the Hellenes, as the Greeks. There's not a lot of written record. We don't really have a whole lot of information about their language, customs, culture. Not a whole lot is known, certainly not as much as we know about the Greeks. But if you want a little bit of context, the Thracians seem to be centered around the modern city of Plovdiv in Bulgaria. Plovdiv, by a lot of records that I've seen, suggests that it is the oldest city in Europe, and it was a very important city to the Thracians. So we can think of Thrace kind of centered in modern-day Plovdiv. The Illyrians, we can think of the equivalent being the modern-day city of Shkodër in Albania, which borders Montenegro. So Greeks, Hellenes to the south, Thracians to the east, Illyrians to the west. In the central part of Vardar Macedonia, in the Vardar Valley, we have the Paeonians. The Paeonians are not as important as the other three civilizations. They're kind of a blend, it seems like, of these three civilizations, and the Paeonians appear to be based out of the city of Veles, the modern city of Veles in North Macedonia, in Vardar Macedonia. The other civilization, again, that's similar to Paeonia in the sense that it's not one of the major civilizational zones, is Dardania. Dardania is located in the northern part of Vardar Macedonia, northern North Macedonia into Kosovo and South Serbia. The Dardanians seem to be closely related to the Illyrians, but probably have a little bit of Thracian influence. They're probably like a blend of the Thracians and the Illyrians. And the capital of Dardania appears to be the modern-day city of Skopje. So again, Thracians, Illyrians, Hellenes, major civilizations, Paeonians and Dardanians, minor civilizations, and this is kind of the what the region of Macedonia looks like around the year 400 BC. The other important, not related to Macedonia, but another important civilization on the Balkans, just to kind of round out what the Balkans looks like at this time, are the Dacians. The Dacians are, they occupy modern-day Romania. If you are familiar with the Romanian car maker Dacia, that is named after the Dacians, as the Dacians are part of the modern Romanians' national mythology. So that's what the Balkans looks like prior to the reigns of Philip and Alexander. So let's dive into ancient Macedon. Ancient Macedon is ruled by the Argead dynasty and is centered around the city of Pella. So Pella is a city that kind of corresponds roughly to modern Thessaloniki. It is not Thessaloniki from what we can tell, but it's pretty close. So this ancient Macedon is centered around Aegean Macedonia, near modern-day Thessaloniki. Now, there is some debate on whether the ancient Macedonians are in fact Greeks or not Greeks, whether they were part of the Hellenic realm or whether they were not part of the Hellenic realm. The reason for this confusion comes from, one, that the modern Slavic Macedonians, as I mentioned in the previous video, have a theory that one of the theories on the origins of the modern Slavic Macedonians is that they're descendants of the ancient Macedonians. So the people who subscribe to this theory like to separate ancient Macedonia from the rest of the Hellenic world. This is helped out by the fact that ancient records show that the ancient Greeks did make reference to the Macedonians as barbarians. So you have essentially the Greeks who live under the polis system, as we call it, under the more civilized Greek city-states in the south, like Athens. They used to refer to the Macedonians as barbarians. Now, a lot of people will look at that and say, oh, this must mean that the ancient Macedonians were separate from the other Greeks because they were referred to as barbarians. This is not exactly the case. So if we look at Greece at this time, if you look at the Hellenic civilization, again, it is not unified. There are different states, there are different portions of the Hellenic world who think of themselves differently. And some of them are more civilized, quote-unquote civilized, than others. So the Athenians, for example, think of themselves as quite civilized. They have philosophy, they have the concept of democracy, they have a very sophisticated civilization. This is opposed to the Macedonians, for example, who don't live under a city-state. They have a kingdom, which some of the ancient Greeks thought was a little bit more archaic or backwards to have kingdoms. The fashionable thing at the time was to have democracies. So the Athenians viewed them as kind of backwards. They still held to the older Greek customs of kings. They were not nearly as educated or sophisticated as the Athenians, for example. So they're seen as kind of backwards. This does not, again, mean that they're not part of the Greek sphere. By all accounts, they do speak a Hellenic language. They worship the Greek gods. The Macedonians compete at the Olympics, which are exclusively reserved for Greeks, for Hellenic people. So there is enough there to suggest that they are definitely within the Hellenic realm, but they are on the outskirts, and they are not as civilized or sophisticated as the other Greeks, and therefore are considered quote-unquote barbarians. At least within the Greek realm. So, if we look at this ancient Macedonia, we see a major figure emerge out of here in the middle of the 4th century BC, and this is Philip II. So, what Philip II is famous for is uniting the Hellenic realm under a single authority, under the authority of the Macedonian kingdom. The way he did this was through a very unique military tactic at the time, which is the phalanx. Phalanx is a infantry formation that the Macedonians utilized very effectively to conquer the other Greeks. So during the reign of Philip II of Macedon, the rest of the Hellenic realm falls under Macedonian control. This unified Hellenic realm is called the Hellenic League or the Corinthian League, the League of Corinth. There's a few different names for it, but basically this is a league of the Greek states unified under Philip II and the Macedonian kingdom. Now, not long after Philip manages to unite the Greeks under his control, he is assassinated. After his assassination, his son, Alexander III, who we more commonly refer to as Alexander the Great, takes control of the kingdom of Macedon and of all the Greeks together who are part of this Hellenic League. What Alexander is known for is challenging the eternal enemy of the Hellenic peoples, the Persians. So he challenges the Persians, he invades Persia, and conquers the Persian Empire. So with his unified Greek force, he invades Asia Minor, into the Levant, into the Near East, conquers the Persians, and expands this Hellenic Empire well into Asia, all the way to India and Central Asia. He forms basically the greatest empire known at that time. It's still one of the largest empires in human history, and this is why he's known as Alexander the Great. However, Alexander also dies under mysterious circumstances, a little bit more mysterious than Philip II. We don't know if Alexander is assassinated, if he's poisoned, if he dies of some disease, but he dies quite young in his early 30s in the city of Babylon in Persia. So once Alexander dies, his massive empire gets broken up into various kingdoms. There's the kingdom that controls the Asian portions of the empire. You have a kingdom that controls the North African, Egyptian parts of the empire, and then you have the Balkans, the Balkan region that remains within the control of the Macedonians and the Argead dynasty. So after the death of Alexander, the Balkans and certainly Macedonia is still ruled over by the kingdom of Macedon of that Argead dynasty. They're still in control. However, there's also a new force rising to the west of Macedonia after the death of Alexander, and this is the Romans, the Roman Empire, which everyone should be familiar with. The Romans, after the death of Alexander, start expanding, and eventually they expand into the Balkan regions. Around the year 220 BC, we see the Romans and the Macedonians start coming into conflict with one another. Now, at this time, there's a very kind of complex set of alliances in the Mediterranean. You have Romans who are allying with Greeks who are not happy under Macedonian rule. You have the Macedonians allying themselves with the Carthaginians, who are the Roman enemy, further to the west. So you have a kind of a complex set of alliances growing in this period with the rise of the Roman Empire. Nevertheless, around the year 220, the Romans and the Macedonians clash, and now there's a series of 4 wars called the Macedonian Wars. These go from roughly 220 BC to about 120 BC, in which the Macedonians and the Romans war with each other. The Macedonians to maintain control of the Balkans, the Romans to conquer the Balkans. It's quite obvious from anyone who knows a little bit about this history that the Romans win. The Roman Empire conquers after these series of 4 wars, manages to defeat the Macedonians and conquers the Balkans, expands even further east and conquers these other kingdoms who are descendants of Alexander's empire, and the Romans essentially establish control over the Balkans, and the Near East. About the demographics. So once Rome conquers the Balkans, it doesn't really change the demographics too much. It does. The Romans are kind of famous for population transfers. They'll take people who they have just conquered and move them to another part of the empire. They'll take people from a different part of the empire, move them to that part of the empire that has been conquered in order to mix things up, make rebellions against the Romans more difficult by mixing the people together. So we have some idea that this happened in Macedonia, in the Balkans, after the Romans take over. Also, the Romans begin settling retired soldiers in the region. So Skopje, the modern day city of Skopje, for example, is famous for this. Romans from all over the empire, from Spain, Germany, Armenia, from all over the empire, get settled in Skopje. And these Romans are, like I said, veterans. These are people who have campaigned with the Roman army, who have retired and now are given land by the Roman Empire to work, to farm with their families. And Skopje is a major city where this occurs. There's actually a few necropolises, Roman cemeteries around the modern day city of Skopje. I'm not sure if they're open to the public or not, but they have been dug up by archaeologists, and there are, we can see people from all over the Roman Empire were settled there and buried in these necropolises. So we know that occurred. However, as far as like Illyrians, Thracians, those civilizations still kind of are left intact, simply because the way the ancient world works is if you are pretty far away from the center of power, it's kind of difficult to assimilate you. So if the Roman Empire, which is seated in Rome, it can't really influence, let's say, distant parts of Thrace too much. It simply doesn't have the infrastructure, the communication isn't there for the Romans to assimilate people in distant parts of the empire. So even though the Romans control this area, they're not really assimilating it heavily, at least not yet. This changes in the year, we're jumping ahead a bit here, to the year 330 AD. The famous Roman Emperor Constantine the Great establishes the second Roman capital in Constantinople on the foundations of the city of Byzantium. Byzantium becomes Constantinople. Constantine names it after himself, and this is now the second Roman capital meant to have more influence on the eastern parts of the empire, which are difficult to govern from Rome itself. Now, when this second capital of Constantinople gets established in the year 330 AD, now we can see a more heavy assimilation of Thracians, of Illyrians, because as opposed to previously, when they were on the distant, hinterlands of the Roman Empire, now they are situated within a stone's throw of the new capital, of the eastern capital. And now, once Constantinople gets established, we see a much more heavy assimilation of these Illyrians, Thracians, Paeonians, Macedonians, who haven't really been assimilated heavily, become Roman. And this occurs, again, quite significantly after the establishment of Constantinople. So, from the 4th century BC to the 4th century AD, this is a very, very brief overview of that time period from prior to Alexander the Great, prior to the expansion of the ancient Macedonian kingdom, through the Roman conquest, through the establishment of Constantinople. You should now have a good idea of this period of time. Thank you very much for watching, and next time we will be discussing the barbarian raids into this Roman territory. So until then, again, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.